introduction of our speaker for today, who is with us again to talk about close encounters in the Middle East through a post-colonial lens. And this presentation is a broad brush overview of too much travel in 2012. Pakistan, Egypt, Jordan, and UAE, visiting and speaking in schools, seeing archeological sites, talking with ordinary people on the streets, attending a three-day wedding in Pakistan, meeting Egyptians in Tahrir Square in Cairo, Egypt, and visiting Petra in Jordan, among other places. This presentation is given through the lens of a social justice academic who teaches at San Jose State University in the College of Education. Some of her questions were, what role has empire played in the lives of people in these countries? What kinds of changes have occurred? What kinds of curriculum exist for K through 12 students, university students? Professor Alpa's research includes post-colonial studies, indigenous education, and unlearning racism and other forms of bias. She teaches multicultural foundation courses to prospective high school teachers. And now let's give a good hand to our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're still in the process of trying to address technological issues here. So if you're in the back, you might want to come forward because we weren't able to make this connection, even though I bought a $32 VGA connector, and we just can't seem to get it together here. Mac has mysteries that we can't solve. So this is, I don't know how many of you have seen the video art history or world art history of the world in like 20 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. This is going to be a very quick tour giving you a sense of what was going on in the Middle East in February and March of 2012. Now that's a year after the Arab Spring in Egypt. And we spoke with ordinary people on the street. We went to Tahrir Square. My interest in going to the Middle East was to see what was happening in Egypt, but also I saw a photo in a calendar that had young Muslim girls looking at weapons on a table, and I'll show you this slide very quickly. This is going to go fast, so you need to come closer if you really want to see this, because this is where it's going to be shown. All right? Is that good? So I wondered, it says the curriculum of Afghanistan on it, and I thought, my gosh, is this really what's going on in Afghanistan? Is this the kind of curriculum that kids are having to learn about? So then I have a dear friend by the name of Samina Fahim Sundas, who actually lives in Palo Alto, who comes to my class once a semester and talks about Islamophobia. Her father and some of her family live in Pakistan, and she said, why aren't you going to Pakistan? And I said, well, I hadn't really thought about it. And she said, well, you must go to Pakistan. My niece is getting married. You can come to the wedding. My brother lives there. You can stay with them. He has some connections with the school district. So I said, okay, why not? And then for 2 or 3 months before we left, my partner and I kept saying, is this a good idea? Because most of the corporate press frames Pakistan as a place that's unsafe, that no one should go to. And the same with Egypt. And we went to Egypt, and they are suffering so intensely because tourism has just evaporated. So these huge boats on the Nile are just empty. You will see, and there aren't even any boats. There were 2 boats on the Nile when we were in Luxor, and they're just, the economy is devastated because they are so dependent upon tourism. So So we went to Pakistan first, and as we got into the plane from Frankfurt going to, I guess it was Abu Dhabi that we left and went to Lahore, we ended up in a city that now my memory escapes the name of it, but it's on the northwest corner of Pakistan, and it's not a really safe place to land. We were landing at midnight, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is not a good place to be. And if you don't know about difference a lot, if you are in a plane and you are the only white folks, it makes you realize that you are the only two white folks on this plane, and everybody else is of color, and most of them Muslim. And that happens all the time to people of color here because it's dominant white society that we live in. So that was a really good experience as well. Anyway, we ended up getting, Peshawar is the name of the city. We ended up getting safely to Lahore, which is a huge old city. I don't know if you know, but Pakistan was partitioned off in 1947, and it's pretty much an Islamic country, and that was the rationale in part. I was interested in knowing how much of the British Empire and any other empire remnants remained in these countries in terms of schooling. What kind of curriculum do they have? And you will see some photos where if I were to not show you the students who were there, you'd never know where this was. It could be Palo Alto, California. I've been to the outback in Australia as well on a research project, and a similar thing happened there. We looked at the walls, just visuals, and they had, the kids were Aboriginal kids, all black kids, all white teachers, white Australian, were putting tinsel on a tree. I have some slides of this if you ever are interested in that trip as well. And I asked the kids, what were they doing? And they were saying, well, we were just told to put tinsel on the tree. And I said, well, what's that about? Do you know about Christmas? No, we don't do Christmas. I don't know what that's about. But the teacher told us to do this. So the incongruence of kids being given a curriculum that is so contrary to their culture is really relevant here, and the same is true in this country, in these countries we visit. Now, this is going to go fast, and I'm going to try and speak over the slides, but I may not be able to catch up because I've got a lot of slides to show. So bear with me. And take some notes if afterwards you want me to talk about something. Now I can't find the cursor. Here we go. I can come back to it, but here we go. First, United Arab Emirates, which wants to be a first world Middle Eastern country. That's the photo. This is the travel. We went to, we went all over the Middle East. This is Abu Dhabi. And it looks like it could be any modern city almost anywhere, except that you will see the mosques. This is a hotel, very fancy. Almost all the workers come from outside of the country. All of the service workers. It's very easy to get around. This is the vision that the Abu Dhabi government would like to have people think of United Arab Emirates. And this is a heritage museum that has all kinds of information about how people lived in the desert before modern society. And it's amazing to see. Camels are still a very important part of the society. Tents, but very fancy tents. We went to an international film festival in Abu Dhabi, and a lot of foreign films were shown there. This shows all the fish in the bay around the area. This is a restaurant we ate in next to this heritage museum. And this is the film festival. And films from all over the Europe and Scandinavia, and even a few from the US. This is a brand new building, mosque that was built in Abu Dhabi, just absolutely amazingly huge and expensive and beautiful. And the man who was a security guard at night when we got there late, so he let us take a little tour on our own, was actually Pakistani, an engineer, and he couldn't get a job in Pakistan as an engineer. This is Pakistan now, and these are little dolls that are in this restaurant, a very fancy restaurant. So when you think Pakistan, you wouldn't think of something like this. And Pakistan was really quite safe. Musician playing some Pakistani music. The music that's behind this is called Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's music. This is the downtown area, section of town where there used to be prostitution, and they've now turned it into stores. In Lahore. Lahore. They have a huge old castle, 11th century castle. You can take tours of it. So this is an old place. These are what the streets look like in Lahore. All kinds of different vehicles for traffic. Donkeys, little taxis that you see in India. This is a guy selling peanuts on the street. One of the things I looked at was what kind of advertising is put up. These are really very colorful, beautiful little individual taxis. Motorcycles. This is the superintendent of public schools, and in Pakistan, there are more private schools than public schools. Now that's happening here, but not to the extent that it's happened there. So most kids who can afford it go to private schools. This is a public school with a teacher, a principal, one of the few places I saw a Pakistani map. And these are some classrooms. This is an all-girls school. She did a lot, this principal, to improve the conditions of this school, but the public schools are far inferior in terms of resources and facilities and classroom size than in the private schools. And you'll see a couple of private schools, but look at this. What language is this? Urdu is almost on the decline. I had a meeting with military wives who were interested in why is the U.S. bombing and putting drones into Pakistan, and they said that they are losing their Urdu because English is the dominant, most important language for everyone to learn now. These are the teachers at this school, and we had a great meeting talking about similarities and differences. Again, if you look around, these are symbols that you could see. These are the alphabet and so on. You could see this in a classroom here in Palo Alto. There is some Middle Eastern history, and we'll see a little of that. But it was amazing. Then that was Urdu. But look at this. It's fun to be fit. The sun and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Disney is everywhere. There's some Urdu here, but just a small bit of Urdu on the wall compared to English everywhere else. This is a private school now. Much better facilities, resources, smaller classroom size, boys and girls in the classroom. There was a concern about the environment. This is the map with all the states, and Lahore's over here. They do study the Mughals. We don't do hardly any work on learning about the Mughals of the Middle East. So this is a big difference in curriculum. They also learn about the fall of the Roman Empire, but it's pretty superficial. And even this, who were the first Americans, American Indians? What are canoes? Pretty stereotypical notion of what Indians are. Nonetheless, they were talking about them. These are traditional paintings and drawings by art students at this high school. Very sophisticated artwork. Earth's energy budget, again, concerned about global warming. This was something that I thought was more evident there than even in this country. This is signs of the heavens and the earth, gnats, bees, and so on. They've got a beautiful arts department. This is some of the work that kids were doing. This is a modern piece of a high school student. Very sophisticated artwork. And they gave us a performance It says, being a global citizen, very interested in connections to the world. I think we have a much more ethnocentric curriculum in this country. Here's a yard. This is the principal of the school. I talked with the faculty there about their needs and concerns. Again, this is Jack and the Beanstalk. This is in Pakistan, Jack and the Beanstalk. We're having tea and discussing the curriculum again. And this is ABCD, a snowman. These are the seasons. These are important historical people who are Pakistani. They did have that, and they also covered the Pakistan news, peace prospects in South Asia. I went to the university and at a mass media presentation I gave on corporate media and independent media, we had a really engaged discussion with this group of college students about their concerns about media representation and misrepresentation of Pakistan. This is some artwork. There's two art teachers who did this sculpture together at this university. And I spoke at this university again about, but they wanted to know a lot about why the U.S. was bombing Pakistan. These are the students and some faculty, and we had a tea and a celebration after the presentation I did. Very interested in knowing why the U.S. was bombing, especially drones, in northwest Pakistan. This is a private elementary school that a major, or colonel actually, developed called Teach a Child. And the whole purpose of this school is to bring in poor kids if they qualify. But look at what their goals are, you'll see. They want to teach a center of socioeconomic excellence for the underprivileged. And their major objectives are to enable these children to enter the future marketplace with the skills. So it's like reproduction theory, teaching for the economy, if you will. This is a couple who invited us to stay at their house. This is a wedding. Weddings are 3 days long. Fascinating. The men dance at one particular time the first night. They dance together. You'll see a shot of that. And then women have their hands painted. This is a tradition that occurs in many Middle Eastern countries. And this was a semi-arranged marriage. One family, couple, were interested in 2 or 3 different women, and the women, in effect, had a choice in whether they wanted to be married to this particular guy. And so the woman did choose. But it's not always the case at all. So this was the night before the wedding day, and the parents of both the bride and the groom are there. She has very well-designed hands with henna and all kinds of coloring. I don't know why, but he doesn't have a particularly happy look at the moment that we caught that. Maybe it was just overwhelmed. It's a lot of days of celebrating. So my partner's here with me, and we were given these clothes, and I felt like we were very much integrated because we did have clothing that kind of didn't stand out. This was the second day. We had another different kind of clothing, different set of clothes. This is at an art college. I thought these were particularly interesting sculptures, and the one that follows, we talked to these art students about their requirements and whether they felt they had enough freedom to express themselves in any way possible. And this was actually a piece of sculpture, which is a man who is so-called terrorist, I think. And this is some traditional work. This young man had done this. So there was traditional and modern, abstract and representational. This man was a model for this particular piece of sculpture. These are the Army wives, and they invited me to a tea at the Officers' Wives Club. Now this is the family we stayed with, big family, 5 kids, And the conversation with these officers' wives was fascinating. They were extremely articulate. They were very interested in knowing whether there was any movement here to help stop the bombing. These are kids performing. This is the daughter of the couple that we stayed with. She's an art student. She took a photo of a man on the street. He has 5 fingers and he's smoking a cigarette. I thought the photo was just beautiful. And her capturing him was good. This is the driver of the car that we stayed with. Now we're off to India. And this is the metro in India in Delhi. And this is some sculpture in the metro. Lots of artwork, and I love artwork. I'm an artist in my own right. This is at Chandigarh. I don't know how many of you know where that is, but it's in North India. And a man by the name of Corbusier, who is an architect, a French architect, designed this building. There's a treasury and a ministry, and then that peace hand for this city. And the city is the most well laid out on a grid city that I've ever been in. And if you've been to other cities in India, you know that it's almost unbelievably hard to find your way around. Whereas here it was a very easy route. Books, this is a bookstore. There's Steve Jobs' books, so they're up to date. Books were cheap. I should have bought a box of books. I was trying to find the Hunger Games for this gal we were going to see in Jordan. My friends, my former students, these are shots of the ministry here, of this architecture. Now we're off to the Taj Mahal. Everybody has to go to the Taj Mahal, they say. And you had to go through a metal detector to get in. And I really had no interest in going to the Taj Mahal. I was much more interested in talking to ordinary people. But when we went anyway, because my partner is an architect, it's a magical place. It's really a magical, anybody been? Beautiful place. But the road going from Delhi to Agra was the most scary part of the whole trip. Far more scary than being in Pakistan. There are like 2 roads, two lanes to the road. You'll see this. I think I have some shots of it. But isn't that beautiful? And there were 4 lanes. People were on the side of the road on either side with motorcycles, trucks, vans. It was just a nightmare. We had to rent a car with a driver to take us there, and we went through the night, and then we had the driver stay overnight with us in the hotel, and then we saw these sights and then came back. But this was beautiful. Although very ostentatious. And with the poverty in India, it's really a striking contrast to see this. This is inlaid enamel and turquoise and different kinds of emeralds and so on, precious stones. People from all over were there. Camels were used to bring people around as taxis, mostly I think for the novelty of it. And across the street from the Taj Mahal is something called the Red Fort. It's a 14th or 15th century fort, beautiful, out of this sandstone, unbelievable architecture. And you can see the Moorish influence. I think Iranians were involved in helping build this. So you know that it's a place where a lot of different groups of people from around the world traveled through and lived in. A lot of friendly kids. We talked to kids and to people in general, wherever we were. There's some boys who are from, I think, Tibet, but I'm not sure. Interested in knowing about us, and we interested in knowing about them. Again, English is becoming the language that is used everywhere. I think if you lose your language, you lose your culture. This is an ad that shows a very westernized something for sale, and that was more and more the case in India. These are trucks that are decorated in beautiful ways, and there are lots of them up on the Pakistani border. There are 3 people on this motorcycle. This is the road. People on the side, people on the side, people in the middle, people passing. It was just packed with people driving these things. And this was, I think this is now in Kerala. Kerala is the southernmost I was interested in these white models. Kerala is the southernmost province in India. It has a 97% literacy rate, and it's a socialist province within a capitalist country. These are waiters at our hotel, and they were just interested in having their photos taken, and we got to know these folks. We were in Triumvantapuram for about a week, and this school is a Catholic school there, and 10,000 students go to school here, preschool through high school. Amazing. And I kept saying, how come the literacy rate's so high? We don't even have that literacy rate here. These were the kids, very hot, humid place, very poor, but this Catholic school was doing very well. This was the president of or principal of the school. In this school, in certain classes, boys were in one class and girls in another, but I did see a couple of places where there were co-ed classes at this very big school. A lot of Western influence. These are the provinces or the states within the province. We're down here. Kerala is in the southernmost tip of India on the Indian Ocean, where we had a chance to visit and swim in a kind of people's beach. We also went to a hotel just to take a look at it because it was so fancy. Look at all the different kinds of transportation. And again, very Western ads. These are very Westernized ads. Billboards. They had a zoo in this city, and they had 11 million people were in this area, and this was the entrance to the university. And I spoke at this university. You can see Che Guevara. Nobody would think Che Guevara would be on a sign at the university entrance. There's a festival called Pongala in this province once a year, and this is a classroom I spoke in, all Muslim students at this university. Again, we talked about peace and war and economic inequality. This festival is once a year, and a million women come together, and this is the beach, and they bring a pot on 2 bricks with another pot on top of it, and they make sweets, and the men can't participate at all. They may help the women get these ingredients to this street scene, but they can't do anything else. This was a family we got to talk with during the day. They were just lovely, and they were delighted to show off their son. And we walked down to the water with them, and the little boy got in the water for a while. Very friendly couple. There they are, and we also got in the water. But this, there they are. This festival was enormous. 1 million women coming together from inside and outside of this city. There are the pots to make some kind of sweet, which they wrapped in green leaf, banana leaves. This is from our hotel, looking out at them starting to get this ready early in the morning. And by noon, the sky was totally filled with smoke because they were all firing up these pots and making these sweets, which they were then going to give to the goddesses in the temple. This is an interesting sign. I can give you all of these things if you let me live. These are animals. It's a very ecological, environmental piece as you enter the zoo. These are just a few shots. A beautiful zoo, which we went to because it was so hot and we wanted to get away from the heat, and it was much cooler there. And we'll get back to a few of these pots in the city life in a minute here. The professor who invited me to come and speak in his class lived out in the jungle in the countryside, and we found out about the jungle very late. They had a well, they had a solar run generator, which I thought was really fascinating. They had some workers there, they had a rice field, they had, this is the family. They lived with their parents in a beautiful house, and they didn't know us from, it was a name I was given. They invited us to dinner. Before dinner, they said, would you like to take a little nap? It's really hot. So they gave us their beds to lie down on a sheet just to rest. Here's the city now. It's getting very, very fogged up with smoke. And this is nothing compared to what was happening. Every little space along every street in this city was filled with these little pots. And then you will see the temple where these people, the women, took their offering and then they distributed all these street, sweets that were left to people on the street. So there's the fires. Only women working in this. They had cinnamon and rice and all kinds of wonderful herbs and this brown sugar. They were trying to keep the streets cool. They splashed some water on some of the street places. But it was an amazing thing to see, and we didn't know we were going to be a part of it even because it wasn't announced. But this is what we saw. And then, yeah. If I do that, it'll set the thing off, though. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry that that music is there.
Turn it down.
I can only turn it, oh, maybe I can turn it down this way. Yeah. There we go. Ah. Okay. So there again, they're very proud of these pots of various and sundry different but similar sweets. And the colors that people wore, brilliant purples and oranges and blues. We went to only 4 cities in India. We went to Mumbai, we went to Trivananthapuram, we went to Delhi, and to Chandigarh. This is the banana leaf that they wrap up. And these people are now, the women are now pulling together all of their equipment and going back to the countryside or wherever. And there's their firewood, hauling it back to their little, this is the temple that they took these honorings to. This is an ad for Bolero. Again, where is this, we might ask. There was a boy ironing shirts on the street. This was near the hotel, and I asked him, did he do this just for anybody? And he said, yeah, bring your shirt. Now, here's a hotel that's on the southern coast. It's called the Lili Hotel. And there was a demonstration of workers there because the workers were being paid unequally. A very fancy place. We couldn't afford this place ourselves. We were someplace else. But we decided to go and see what was going on and to see if we could find out whether this young man at the entrance who was telling us, don't stay in there, don't eat in there, don't do anything, please. So we tried to honor that, but we talked to several of the workers and they agreed that women were, first of all, paid less for the same job, and that some jobs were, there was no sense of seniority and there wasn't any sense of fairness, and the workers were not getting really a livable wage. Look at how beautiful this place is. So we sent an email after we came back saying we visited and wanted you to know that we hoped you would settle the strike or whatever it was, and that people needed a livable wage. But it was this could be anywhere. I just came back from the Yucatan, and this could be the Yucatan. I mean, it was just, you sometimes don't know where you are. These things are so similar and so disconnected from the ordinary daily life of people. This was a Communist Party election in Kerala, and this is the beach. Beautiful beach. A woman sold me a pineapple, and we started talking about, first we started talking about coconut oil, and then we started talking about people's life conditions, and we had a great long conversation. This was somebody, I think, from Cambodia, who we started talking with and spent a part of the day. We did a little swimming here. Very hot, very humid. We found out before we left that there are little travels into lagoons that you can take on boats for 3 days or 3 weeks or whatever, into the jungle. It's very much jungle in this southern part of India. A French woman told us about this. She said it was the best part of her trip. This is a Saudi going off in the airport to Saudi Arabia. Now we're in Mumbai, huge city with tremendous poverty. And we moved from one hotel in one part of town to another. This was the first African or black model. These are models with clothes that I saw anywhere in all of these travels. Most of them were white dolls. Just like in Australia, here you have all these black kids and they're playing mostly with white dolls. You know, it doesn't say, it says something about representation. If you don't see yourself in dolls or playthings, then you're not important. You're not visible. This is from a walkway overlooking the train station. We took a train, just a short trip on a train, an ordinary train, from one part of Mumbai to another, and it was really fascinating. First of all, it was filled with people. It didn't have any air conditioning. It was like you could just kind of hop on. There were bars there were no windows, just bars, and then open doors that you went into. And this is a really poverty-stricken area near the train station where people are living in these real hovels. So you get a taste of the poverty by looking at things like this. And in Mumbai, in the city, on one part of the city, it was just amazing to see how many people were living in tiny, tiny squatter conditions. This is where they're living, and the train comes by. There's a train that's similar to the one we took. But that's a major form of transportation for a lot of people. And this part of Mumbai was all Muslim. We didn't know that when we went there, but we started looking at the food and the people who were around it. It was all Muslim as opposed to Hindu or another different ethnic group. This now is in Cairo, and this is a very fancy bar and restaurant in Cairo, and it reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever read Alexandria Quartet. It's Lawrence Durrell's quartet, and it reminded me of that whole scene, this kind of Orientalism. This is the Nile, and this is a bridge, one of the bridges that people went over as they were protesting. This is near Tahrir Square. This is the Cairo Museum, very close by. And you can see Mubarak's office building in the background here. They burned it out. People aren't sure whether Mubarak did it himself to keep people from having access to his files, or whether it was done by people who were angry, ordinary Egyptians. But these are all kinds of signs. We spent hours here. We went back and forth. And the hotel we stayed in, there were some activists who were interested in organizing. And one of the first things they said, and this is an occupied tent, was we should have gotten rid of the military. And you can see what's happening now. These are some students who didn't speak English but spoke Spanish. This man spoke quite a bit of English, and we talked to him about what was going on. He lost his son. These are all the martyrs. A lot of people lost their lives, not only men but women as well. So each day we would go there and just talk to people about what they were planning, what was next, what were they doing. They were interested in finding out what we thought about, and what the folks who were friends thought about what was going on. This man, I think, was one of the organizers. There's his son who he lost. And these are some of the photos. There are bridges that go across to islands. We stayed in Zamalek, which is an island very close to Tahrir. And these are photos of the February 2011 demonstrations where people were swarming across these bridges to Tahrir Square. And American University isn't very far away. You can see it better here. Look at this. It's just thousands of people coming together to demonstrate. Again, these are martyrs. There was a little book that I picked up called Tweets from Tahrir, which showed you what was going on during those days in February as they were pushing Mubarak out. And these again are photos all over this square. I spoke in a teacherette course to teachers and faculty at American University. You'll see a photo of this. And one thing I learned was how traditional their Ed Psych course was, and their courses in general, very Eurocentric, Anglocentric courses. In the background here, you can see the burnt out building. And these are tents. And this is an effigy of, I don't know whether it's Mubarak. But this is what Tahrir looked like, and I think it looks that way again. And many of these tents were pulled down and then they put them up again. Yeah, here's the building. This was Mubarak's office building near Cairo Museum. Flags from all over the world. And this was young people and old people and middle-aged people. It was not just young people who were engaged in this effort to dismantle the Mubarak dictatorship. But because the military was in control and still is, they still have a long way to go. And then I asked someone, this was the hotel I stayed in. This is American University, and this woman's an academic. She's Egyptian, but she has some roots here in this country. Lots of signs of protest. When I asked people, especially academics at the university, what they thought the future was for this revolution, they said, you know, this is going to take a long time. We're going to have some conservative folks. We're going to have some people we don't like. This was a classroom. Now, this is a little bit of the sculpture on the way out to a couple of sites. This is Valley of the Kings. A store on the way to and from. Not very many people there, not very many people buying. This is an amazing place, although it was very hot, even in February, but so few people. And because of the fear in the part of tourists that they might not get to and from a place, because there were some kidnappings, they had us get up at 3:30 in the morning. We had to take a bus to get out to these places, and they had a convoy. They had police on either side of the buses to ensure that nothing would happen. So if you go now, that'll probably be the same thing. These are amazing pieces of art that people really need to see. This is an insect. I'm sorry, it's not clear because if you're sitting in the back, you're not going to see that. This was the taxi driver who invited us from Luxor to his home. He said, do you want to come over and just see my family? This was his wife. He had another wife in Cairo, and these were his 3 kids, and they fixed a meal for us, and we sat down and ate with them. She stayed in the kitchen. I kept trying to get her to come back, but that didn't happen. These were some of the fields near his house. He actually had some acreage, and he brought some kind of green vegetable. This is Luxor, the downtown area. There was a marriage going on, and they had a celebration. This was a school, and this was the vision for this school, and objectives, which if you need to know about, we can talk about later. In Luxor, we met a guy who was at the hotel who said he'd take us to the airport. And I would like to tell that story about what he had to say because I think it reflects a lot of men's situation this is the kind of hand decoration that goes on for weddings and various ceremonies. I think she just recently gotten married. This was in Luxor. And this is near the Aswan Dam in the southern part of Egypt. There's a picture of the dam. There's a new dam and an old dam. And when the new dam was made, they had to take and this is a tribute to that dam. The Russians were involved in helping fund it. But they had to lift the pharaoh's tombs out from a flood area, and they reconstructed, put them back together, and so they're in a higher place. That remind me to tell you about this man who took us to the airport. He was 36 years old. He'd been married for 10 years. He had one daughter. She was 2. We had to take a boat to get to this island temple, a beautiful, very well constructed and very well kept temple outside of Luxor. And at that time, the Coptics were the Christian group in Egypt said, oh, we really get along with the Muslims and there are no problems, and then this war came about, and now there's all this conflict, and who knows where it'll go. These are really well-kept artworks. Some of them encased in rooms that have some air control so that they don't crumble and deteriorate quite so easily. Too many of these for this hour. I hope that we go a little faster here, but I can't stop this now, otherwise I have to start all over. I'm going to tell you about this man's story because you can see these in any art presentation of Egypt. He said, I'm really having some problems psychologically. He's very articulate in English. And he said, can I talk with you about these? And we said, sure. And so we sat in the taxi. We had about an hour and a half at the airport. And it wasn't a taxi, it was a car from the owner of the hotel owner that he drove for the owner to the airport. He said, my wife is not interested in having a sexual relationship with me anymore. And we said, well, why not? And he said, this is a crocodile in southern Egypt, and the southern Egyptians are very much more dark-skinned compared to light-skinned Egyptians in Cairo. Now, these people were not so dark-skinned, but the influence of the Sudanese and the northern part of Africa and Egyptians is very evident. This is a Coptic church. He said, we're from the countryside, and my wife is from a poor farmer's background, and I'm from a middle farmer's background. And what's happened is, these are the tombs, the pharaoh's tombs that were elevated up and situated because of the flooding of the Suez when they put the southern part of the Aswan Dam in. He said, my wife had a clitorectomy, and now my wife is not interested in sex anymore. And my wife puts my daughter in between us, so we don't have any sex. And I'm very frustrated, and I'm not alone. There are a lot of men my age who are facing this. What we end up doing is going to these cafes where it's all men, and they play checkers or chess or board games and smoke and drink coffee. But he said, I can't go on the rest of my life. I'm 36. I can't go on the rest of my life. I said, well, how do you know about this? Or how, He said, I had a relationship with a woman from New Zealand before I got married. She lived with me for about a year. And then she had to go back to New Zealand because her mother was ill. So he said he had this kind of free-form, very sensual relationship. And now he has a wife who is not interested in him sexually at all. And I said, is this very common? He said, oh, it's too common. We don't know what to do about it. We don't know who to talk with about it. I said, well, do you mind if I share this story? And he said, not at all, because it's a conflict in the society at large. I said, what about middle-class women? Does this happen to middle-class women? He said, in general, not the case. So I asked, I have an Egyptian friend at San Jose State, and I asked, this is the Nile, and you can see here's a big boat. These are these big cruise ships, but that was the only one, and it didn't look like it had anybody in it. And generally, these are the coffee shops where this guy frequents. This was a family having a picnic lunch. So it's a real serious social conflict. And this is a view of the Nile. We spent a couple days in this little city. And so few tourists. But this is a dilemma that I think a lot of peasants in the country face. And so I share it with you because you said it would be okay to do so. But I thought it was really interesting. I asked him if his wife felt that she was hurt or that it was uncomfortable. He said, no, it wasn't that. It was just, and now the other piece of that is that she wanted her 2-year-old daughter to have this same procedure done. And he said, I don't want that to happen to my daughter. So he said, if I divorce her, she will be an outcast for the rest of her life. She will have no access to another man, to anything else. So it's a real social dilemma for the country. These are really well-preserved ruins. There's an avenue of the Sphinxes that they are reconstructing that we'll see in a moment. But these are just amazing pieces of art that have withstood time. I talked to this girl for about an hour and a half about her views about society and the culture in general. It was a very interesting conversation. Only not enough time to share this, but this is going towards the avenue of the Sphinxes, which goes for, they're reconstructing this now, and it goes for miles. The pyramids in Cairo are falling apart. If anybody has been, you can see how chipped and worn away they are, and we'll maybe see a little of that before it ends, before this ends. We also went to Jordan and to Petra in Jordan. I have a former student who is teaching at a high school in Jordan, in Amman, and she said, oh, you've got to go to Petra, and I didn't even know what it was. It's one of the 7 wonders, and it's built in the 1100s. It was Bedouins who basically constructed a treasury and several other buildings in these large sandstone canyons in southern Jordan. A really beautiful and amazing place to visit. And Jordan is suffering tremendously because of the influx of Syrian refugees. It's a very poor country in its own right, although it's a developing country, and the king has been very friendly towards the working population, ordinary folks, people in the working class, farmers and so on, and so there's not been an upheaval in Jordan, although there's tensions around that, and who knows what will happen with all of the conflict in the Middle East, and especially the pressures on the society because of these huge numbers of Syrian refugees who are coming into the country. We also went to Jerusalem and to Ramallah, and if you went to just Jerusalem, you'd never know what was going on in the West Bank or the Middle East, or Israel in general. You'd just see the churches and the Dome of the Rock and the walled city, but it's almost impossible, except for the walls that control people in and out of Ramallah where we went. You wouldn't have a clue as to what was going on. Those were kids we talked to about the curriculum in Egypt. These are the pyramids, and there were very few people here as well. And people were dying to sell their trinkets and to take you on a carriage ride and whatever else. The economy is just hurting so fundamentally from this crisis. So I'm going to let these run and maybe ask if there are some questions, because this will go on longer than we have the time, and you can at least see a little bit of Petra in that, and I'll tell you when we come to Petra. So if there are any questions, thank you. That's me with a Bedouin top to keep my head cool. And this is Jordan.
When the people in Pakistan ask you, why is the U.S. bombing our country, what did you tell them?
Well, first I told them that I didn't approve and that I was against what the U.S. was doing, and that I thought it was an illegal act. We don't have permission to do this, and that the government of our country is kind of a runaway police state in a way, and that their rationale, at least what the government has told us, is that there are, terrorists in the northwest part of Pakistan. That was not very satisfactory, but that's what I said. This is a school in Amman where my student is teaching, and she's adopted 2 Chinese kids from China, two girls, and they're having a kind of a festival.
If I were asked that question, I would, and some of the other things that you talked about, I would explain that the reason that we bomb them is because there really are terrorists over there who really are coming over here and blowing up airplanes and flying planes into buildings and trying to put bombs in train stations. And the countries, the Muslim countries, practice crucifixion still as part of the official way of punishing people, hanging women for because they were raped. And what you talked about, the genital mutilation, being part of their culture, and the guy's like, well, how come my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, because, well, their culture practices, barbarism, and they're trying to spread that barbarism all over the world, so,
well,
I'm openly, Islamophobic because there is a reality-based reason to be Islamophobic, and if Islamists would quit behaving like barbarians, we wouldn't be over there bombing them.
Okay. I think that we can essentialize Muslims. I think there are some Muslims who we could probably call terrorists justifiably. The people who did 9/11 were not from Pakistan. None of them. None of them. And in Egypt, it's not only Egypt, it's a lot of the Muslim countries who have genital mutilation, but not all, and not even among all classes. Egyptian middle class is exempt from that. Women do not have to face that. So I think we have to be specific about who's doing what to whom, and that there are terrorists, but the whole northwest of Pakistan is not terrorist, and we've done incredible damage, killing hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians in Pakistan with our drones. These people have nothing to do with the terrorism, and yet they've been targeted. Okay?
Yeah, I'm tempted to get sucked into that, but I'm going to put that on the side for a minute. We can talk about that later. I have a question. You talked a lot about education. What is the status of education with respect to evolution and biology? Does that ever interfere with their religious beliefs? Did you see any evidence of that?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's almost class-bound. I think people who go to good private schools have a scientific analysis of evolution, and I think people who go to religious Muslim schools that are for the poor oftentimes get a creationist interpretation. No, they're private. Oh, well, some are private and some are public. Most of them are poor, private. I think it's 49% of the schools, for instance, in Pakistan, and again, I can only speak about this particular city in Pakistan, are private schools of whatever flavor, religious, non-religious. Much more non-creationist in general, what I saw. Yeah. But I remember reviewing a piece of scientific, quote-unquote, writing about science for the high school or college, I can't remember which, by a Muslim from Iran, and there was no way I could talk about it as scientific. It was the most weird piece I've ever... It wasn't being taught, it was an article for publication in a journal. So, There's a lot of diversity. I can't generalize about that. I can only speak to what I saw there.
Yeah, Jerry Gratz, I'm responding to your comment about the Syrian refugees. I just saw a program yesterday, Bill Moyer's program. I think it's either the current one or certainly a recent one, and there were 2 parts to it, and the second part was specifically about Syrian refugees, including some interesting pictures, and I recommend it, Bill Moyer's program.
Yeah, I think he's great. I think he's great. I think he's one of the very few PBS people allowed to offer a different take on what's going on in the world and our own country.
I wondered what reaction, excuse me, to America that you heard in Egypt. We read that we're blamed for supporting the old regime and not supporting the present one.
You know, I felt, and this is a generalization, but I felt that the Egyptian people that we talked to were far more sophisticated about making a distinction between the people of a country and the government of a country. And there were a couple of photos in this. By the way, this is the Petra area, where there are caves and whatever else that people live in. And I felt that the one photo in here was a woman in a bathing suit with a U.S. flag, and she's stepping on the head of a U.S. person, I think, a military person. I think that the people that we spoke with clearly saw that the people of this country didn't have much of a standing against what the government was doing with this country. So there was a distinction. It wasn't all U.S. people are bad. It was that they did not like what the government was doing or supporting. But there was a mix of points of view. So that was one major one I saw, but it wasn't the only one.
I have 2 questions. First of all, did you get to Ramallah?
Yes.
And you didn't.
Yeah.
And
You'll see Ramallah here.
and second, if you would answer, were there no terrorist bombings going on in Pakistan that these people were aware of?
In the Northwest, while we were there, there were small, you mean drone bombings or Taliban or?
Were there terrorist bombings, not drone attacks?
No, we were there. We were there for 2 months in that area, and there were nothing. But the paper did, report on bombings that did occur, whatever kind they were.
What was your experience in Ramallah? I was interested in that.
Yeah, we were told, I'm a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and we were told that we should not take a taxi to Ramallah from Jerusalem because we would be given special treatment. We should take the bus. So we took a shuttle, and it was really clear that was the case. You will see if we can get to this before it ends, you'll see the walls have all kinds of lots of protest statements. This is in Amman and Jordan, and it's a huge coliseum that's very well preserved. We had to go from the bus through a gate where everybody had to take everything out of their pockets. We had to have everything go through metal detectors. We had to go through a gate that let only a few people through at a time, and then we had to go through another door with a metal detector. This is just getting in and out of Ramallah. There were 3 women who were ahead of us who were turned back because they couldn't leave Ramallah. They were not allowed to leave. They didn't have any grounds for leaving to go anywhere. So they were basically confined to Ramallah. We wanted to see Arafat's tomb, and we didn't have enough time, but we could have done that. We were free to do whatever we wanted to in Ramallah. And Ramallah folks were very interested in talking to us in restaurants if we asked questions, but we just kind of looked around. But clearly, if we had come with a taxi, we wouldn't have even known that people can't go from Ramallah, outside of Ramallah, to Jerusalem or anywhere else without going through this huge gated procedure with soldiers and guns and so on. And this is postcard that I was given there showing how Palestine had been reduced to this little spot on the map. This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Palestinian woman who is a representative at this is the American Colony Hotel. Strange name, I thought. And we had lunch with her, and this is the Ramallah wall here that we had to go through. This is in Ramallah. We stayed there for in and out for a couple of days. We ate there, and we talked to people. This was a poster that was in the restaurant that we ate in, which we found very interesting. This is a street scene in Ramallah. And the flag, the Palestinian flag. And then here we are at the gate on another day. And this is the kind of barrier that you face when you go in and out of these places.
So lunch is ready when you are, Roberta.
Okay. This is the gate to one of the gates to the old city in Jerusalem. So you can watch these at your leisure if you wish, or have lunch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.